What's up guys, Sub-Zeric here, and there's some more juicy TFT drama. So if you guys didn't catch it, over the weekend was the Tacticians Trials #2. I played in this, Kurum, as you can see by his beautiful face over there, played in this, Soju played in this, Emily Wang played in this, Rainplosion played in this, Toronto Tokyo played in this. So many fantastic players played in this tournament to try to make it to the Tacticians Cup, which is, you know, the tournament that leads into regionals, that gives you qualifier points for regionals, all that good stuff. Some crazy stuff happened in this tournament. I'll play a few clips for you, and then we can just talk about all of them. This first one is from Kurum's stream. This was day 3, yeah, day 3, and this was his first game. He's in a very solid spot to top 2 here, but there's a player here, this Wit player here, has an Annie 3, but yeah, you can see it on the bench right here. But you'll notice something interesting is that the Annie 3 is on the bench. You know, that's pretty strange that his Annie 3 is sitting on the bench there. Why is that? Well, let's let the clip roll.
Wait, what? He saw he was fighting this guy and he sacked on purpose, but he fought his ghost. He's trying to send me third? Okay. Bro, what? I just went third. Wait, what?
So you can see in the clip, this player here is going to fight third place here. And he says, I actually want third place to win this fight, so I'm going to take out all of my strongest units and try to let them live, and then try to kill Kurum and send Kurum third. Now, why would a player do this? Why does this player care about Kurum going third versus this player going third? It's actually quite interesting. They actually typed out their reasoning in chat because Kurum asked, and it's small up here, so I'll read it out for you. Kurum says, "Why are you sacking? Just curious. Why sack?" Wit responds, "You're a better player. I'm guaranteed first." So their logic here is that Kurum is a better player, so they want to take as many points away from Kurum as possible, so they're going to grief him, and ideally for them, Kurum goes third, and they have less competition for the rest of the tournament. We'll talk about all this, but I want to go through the rest of the examples and then throw on a VOD for you guys, your Subway Surfers. This is a VOD from Rainplosion's final game on day 2. Rainplosion absolutely smurfed up the entire weekend. She was angling for a Zyra reroll this game, and then notices something pretty interesting. This is a player in her game.
Why do they have 5?
What? Who is holding, this is 8 Zyras, I believe, in what is kind of a Kog'Maw reroll comp, except their Kog'Maw items are Nashor's Jeweled Gauntlet and a Bramble Vest, and then they've just made a Morello onto their Zyra, which is a do-nothing item on Zyra, because Zyra already applies Wound. They also took Hedge Fund and Tiny Titans so that they could roll for this board, so that they could max roll for whatever this board is. Zyra is a unit that provides 0 synergy onto this board. It looks like a Kog'Maw reroll board. They've got the Caitlyn's in the background that they've just hastily thrown a random Zyra 3 onto. So, pretty interesting there as well. Another grief scenario that I will talk about. And then this last one is actually not a grief scenario, but it's just an egregious, I mean, it's just, let's look at it, man. Let's look at it. This is Kurum. Again, this is day 1 Kurum, and it's 3-5, and he notices an interesting board that he's fighting.
What the fuck is going on, bro? Sniper, +1, Shojin, Rod, Nashor's Tooth on bench.
He also doesn't mention here, but this player is...
Just take Sniper Emblem and just slams a bunch of AP items.
It is 3-5 there, level 7, 0 gold. They sent it to 0, and Kurum actually loses his win streak.
Level 7, 0 gold. Like, what the fuck is this fucking assassination, man? Come on.
Kurum loses his streak from fighting this player. Okay, so let's throw on this Rain VOD just to have it in the background while I can talk about all this stuff. This is a Rain VOD from day 3. She actually needed a really, really good performance in this game, because as you can see, her scores going into the last couple of games were actually pretty rough. 7-4, 3-7 were pretty bad scores going into game 5, so she needs to clutch it out this game. Okay, So let's go by one and talk about these 3 examples, because we've talked about griefing before. I know you guys have opinions on griefing. I'd love to hear them in this scenario. I have opinions on griefing. And yeah, it's just fun to talk them out in the court of public opinion. First thing, speaking of court of public opinion, is that there is a phrase in the rulebook that talks about this exact scenario, the one that Kerm was in, where a player took units off of the board. So I'll actually read the section of the rulebook out here. Collusion. This is section 9.1.2 in the Code of Conduct. Collusion, defined as cooperation or conspiracy to cheat or deceive others. The cooperation or conspiracy can occur among players, staff, or other organizations, and can be done for the sole benefit of the parties involved in the cooperation or conspiracy. The list of conspirators is not exhaustive. Collusion includes but is not limited to acts such as, and bullet point 9.1.2.1. Soft play is defined as an agreement among 2 or more players to not damage, impede, or otherwise play to a reasonable standard of competition in a game. Now, if you want to be a real rules lawyer, you could say that says an agreement of 2 players. The person getting griefed for in this scenario did not necessarily agree to this griefing, so maybe that doesn't fall under the standard of soft play. One player is certainly soft playing to benefit the other player's HP. And to me, if you just think of the spirit of the rule, I would say this absolutely is a scenario where soft play is occurring, if that's what they want to call it. And you're obviously not going to hurt the person who receives the benefit of soft play in this situation, but I think the person who is soft playing should receive some kind of penalty. Now, there is a counter argument to this. There is a counter argument. This has happened, well, similar things have happened before in tournaments, where it's in a player's best interest to actually end. So there have been situations in tournaments before where, player 2 is in second place and there's another player in first place, and it's a final 2 lobby. And say, for simplicity's sake, that this is a checkmate final lobby, and if the person in second place wins the lobby, they win the tournament and they go to the World Championships, because this is something that's happened before. And the person who is in first place currently, if they win that lobby, then we go into a next game. It can be in the first place player's interest to actually just FF the game in that spot, because sometimes world seeds, well, every world seed, basically, for quite a while, has been, you give it to a few people based on the tourney, like top 1, 2, 3, and then usually there's an extra seed for whoever has the highest average placement across the tourney. And so it can actually be in your benefit to FF, have the tourney end, and say, okay, I'm not going to get that first place slot, but I'm going to grab that highest AVP slot. And this has actually been allowed in the past. It's been explicitly allowed in the rulebooks. We've seen this happen before, where it's in a player's interest to FF, and they say, okay, I'm going to FF here, grab my free world slot, or sometimes it's even like placements in a tourney, say, I'm going to FF here, and, if I FF, then I win the tourney. I can't remember exactly what scenario that would occur in, but, there are situations where it's actually in players' benefit to FF in scenarios like that. And so, is this any different, taking units off of your board to hurt Kurum, who you want to do worse? You can also think of an example. Say Kurum and this player are at very, very close scores. And so if Kurum goes second, Kurum will be, say, 1 point ahead of this player. And if Kurum goes third, they'll be even with this player and they'll win tiebreaker, something like that. Then it could very well be in their best interest to advance to grief Kurum, right? If the difference between Kurum going second and third is the difference between me advancing or not, then it actually makes sense for me to grief Kurum. So it's actually a difficult question. In a spot like that, it's much less. You can make much less of an argument for it, because that was the first game that player basically just griefed Kurum, like they said, because Kurum's a better player, and so they wanted to give Kurum the lowest possible chance of advancing in the tournament, or make it so that he would have a lower score, so that maybe that player can do well relatively. But it's I don't know, it's kind of crazy, and I can certainly see the argument that it actually benefited that player to grief Kurum there. And I mean, I don't think at the end of the day it did. end up making a huge difference. Kura made it through regardless of being griefed or not. But it's something interesting to think about, and I still don't really know because, the rulebook does say that you can't do what that player did. And so if we just follow by the rulebook and the spirit of the law, you should not be able to do that. There have usually been specific exceptions made in tournaments where, say, FFing could actually benefit you. But we've never really had this scenario happen before, where someone's griefed someone else because they said, you're a good player, so I'm going to grief you. So I'm still not sure exactly where I fall on it. I do think it's a little... It's icky, at least in my... I feel like it's a bit icky, just seeing that happen. And if you just follow the spirit of the rules, that would not be allowed. And, I cannot imagine being in a spot like that and saying, I'm going to grief Kurum because he's a better player and I want him to have a lower placement. I feel like that is... yeah, it doesn't give you a warm, fuzzy feeling. So that's that. Second scenario up there. This was, reminder, the scenario where Rainplosion was playing Zyra Reroll, and a player went out of their way to pick up a Zyra 3-star. They ended up actually hitting Zyra 3, so Rain couldn't play for Zyra 3. She ended up capping out like a 4th that game, which, honestly, hats off to Rain that she could even get a 4th in that game after being in such a crazy spot. But yeah, Rain ends up going 4th in that lobby because that player basically takes Zyra 3 from them. Now, important thing that I didn't actually note when I was going through that game. That player was a player from the Latin America South region, and there was another player in that lobby from the Latin America South region. Now, that player did not explicitly state, I'm griefing you to the benefit of another player in Latin America South, but we've seen this in the past with the griefing that's happened in other multi-region tournaments where it's happened that people have said, I'm basically going to grief people who are not from my region and try to have someone from my region do as well as possible. So, once again, that's one that certainly just seems egregious, that, there is no reason for that person to be playing a Zyra 3 with Morello on their board, using all of their hedge funds rerolls. They went the fastest 8th of their life, by the way, because how could you not when that was what you were doing? So that seems like an egregious example of griefing that, if you go 8th in tournament, it's really hard to argue that it's for your own benefit. I think that's usually where it falls. Is that if you're griefing someone and it's for your own benefit, that's perfectly fine, because it's for your own benefit. You're doing your best to advance in the tournament, or, to advance in whatever, like the final lobby is, or to get the highest, prize pool, or to, get the world slot. But when it becomes you're griefing someone because of their region, or because you just don't like them, because they, they griefed your fortune loss streak or something like that, then it becomes... I would say, necessarily a problem. I would say the person in the second example there is necessarily just a griefer, and they should absolutely receive some sort of a punishment, because there's no reason that they should be doing that. I mean, that's actually crazy. So I think that's a pretty cut and dry example. I guess that actually creates kind of a nice framework to think about the other example with Kurum, is that player did do something that, in their opinion, was in their best interest. And so can you punish someone for doing something that's in their best interest? I mean, some people would certainly say no. So those are those first two examples. The third example is actually going to branch me into a larger topic. So let's talk about that, which is just the horrible play. That was not griefing. That was take Sniper Emblem, slam Shojin Nashers, roll it to 017. They ended up with a Sniper Emblem at the end of the game, a Sniper Emblem Ari 2 on their board, holding 8 Aris on bench, trying to find Ari 3. That's just bad play. You can't, for a second, say, maybe... I mean, you can't even accuse them of griefing, because it wasn't good for them. It was just objectively bad play. And as someone who played in this tourney, who played all 3 days, there were a lot of examples of that, where there are just bad players in these tourneys. And I know I'm the first to say that, bad is relative, that, people who say, oh, if you're 1 KLP challenger, you suck at the game, because, you could be 1.4 KLP if you just didn't make any mistakes. I'm the first to say that's not it. That kind of thinking is just stupid, and that, every everyone above me is, no life's the game, and everyone below me is bad at the game. But I will say that if you don't want to use the word bad, which like fair, like I'd actually prefer not to use the word bad. If you just come at it from the perspective of the competition, the first day or two of the tourney feels just completely mismatched competition-wise. There's just an insane number of players that are very, very that are just outclassed by the high elo North American players, mostly that are playing. There's some very strong high elo Brazilian, Latin American players that are also playing that outclass the other players. But I'm kind of left in a similar state to where I left my last video when I was talking about these tournaments. Whereas, okay, so we've made this change in the tournament structure, and there have been a lot of issues with it, and I'm going to talk about that as well. And it's so that we can have these tourneys where Kurum has to play against a player who's probably the equivalent of like a diamond player on North America. I mean, those decisions are decisions that I would expect. I have coached people who have not made decisions as egregious as that, who are diamond in TFT, And obviously, if you're a diamond player in TFT, you're making some big mistakes, but just to say, it's a bit crazy. It is a bit crazy, the skill disparity between the top players in these tourneys and the bottom players in these tourneys. And so at that point, I was thinking about this as well. Then the tourney doesn't really become, can I, do my best and, outplay all of these players and, see how I stack up against the best. It almost just becomes, am I going to mess up? Am I going to hit that bottom percentage low roll? Soju played in this tournament, and he went out day 2. I didn't get a chance to watch Soju's games yet. I actually do want to watch his games to see, if it was just a horrible low roll, or if, he actually just didn't play that well in his games. I'm not sure. But Soju, I believe, said that, his games were just, like, unplayable low rolls. And when the tournament format is this one, where, you're playing against these people who are at such a skill disparity from you, all you're really, like, the only crazy thing that could happen is an egregious low roll from you puts you in a really bad scenario, and then you end up getting knocked out of the tournament, which just feels really bad. When you're playing against people who are, like, similar skill level as you, these things feel less bad because you say, well, I low rolled really hard, but, like, I also made a lot of mistakes, and, like, I got knocked out because my competition was really good, right? But if the only way you get knocked out is if you just horribly low roll, then it makes the tournaments feel worse. And also, in my opinion, as someone playing in these tourneys, I played in this tourney, and when I made it through day 1 and day 2, I didn't feel like a sense of accomplishment. Like, wow, I'm doing it. I mean, I felt a little bit of that. But the biggest thing that I felt is like, oh, okay, I did not get eliminated early in this tournament. I'm not a complete fraud, because the thing that goes along with that is, okay, so if you get eliminated early in these tourneys, then people say, well, how could you possibly get eliminated, in a tourney like this when, there's this level of player? And variance exists in TFT. If you look at Rain's performance across the weekend, she dropped the most points overall. Her scores, going into game 4 of day 2 were like 1-1-1, 2-1-1, 1-1, 2-1, something like that. So it's hard for me to look at a player like Rain's performance and say that it's even possible for, if you put Rain in this tournament 100 times, how many times would she actually get eliminated? One or two, maybe, just bottom 1-2 percentage low rolls. Who's to say? But all of that is just saying that the tournament format doesn't feel good right now, and I talked about this in my last video. And I guess I can branch this into actually another point. Spetham tweeted this out. Spetham, really, really nice dude, a person who competes in TFT, not like a sort of like name brand streamer that you see streaming all the time, but he's done well in TFT tournaments in the past, and is just a semi mainstay of the competitive TFT community. He did very well in days 1 and 2, but then had a bad day 3 and got eliminated. And he tweeted something like, I was one of the best performers days 1 and 2, and then I had a really bad run of games and I got eliminated day 3. Would not recommend taking off work for this, because that's the other piece of this. This was a Saturday, Sunday, Monday tournament. So a lot of people had to take off work on Monday to play in this tournament. And if you have to take off work on Monday to play in this tournament, and you end up getting eliminated to a low roll, or even, you have to take off work on Monday to play in this tournament, and you end up playing against someone who, you just feel like is such a worse player than you that it's almost like it doesn't feel good to compete against them. I think that sucks. And as someone who also played in the tournament, who I'm lucky that my job is super flexible and I work from home, and so I can just queue it up basically as long as I get my work done for the day and just play in the tourney and not worry about that. It feels really, really bad for all the people who can't compete because of this format or who have to take days off work. Spetham is the example of someone who had to take a day off work to compete in this tournament, and I mean, it sounds like he didn't feel that it was worth it because of the fact that he ended up getting eliminated, which is perfectly fair. But there are other players. I've talked about Joe Bookmark in the past, who, fantastic player. He was doing, a lot of, oh my God, really 2-on-9. I mean, it's on 9. It's reasonable. But yeah, he was doing fantastically in tournaments in previous sets, but he can't play this set because he has a job. He gets off too late to play in these tournaments. That feels really, really bad. And so I talked about in this last video, and I don't want to tread the exact same ground as that video because I've said my piece on that. But all of this to say, we need something to change. The griefing stuff is fun to talk about, sure. But I'm just holding my breath for this last fight because Rain just barely ends up going third this game, which is like perfect. She ends up, her scores end up actually being perfect here. And this is a good place to end the video, actually. But yeah, we need something to change, and I pray that set 12 has a different competitive format. I really hope that we are not locked into this competitive format for the immediate future. Oh, the other thing that I didn't even touch on, by the way, is that it's a slog. I got to day 3 of the tourney, and I said, man, I've played 3 days in competitive TFT already, and if I make it the next weekend, I have to play another 3 days. And I love TFT. TFT is so fun to play, but having to play this many days of competitive TFT and having them be work days is crazy. Okay, that's all I'll say for the video. I'd love to know you guys' thoughts on all this stuff in the comments down below, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.